All right, so let's take this factoring the greatest common factor of polynomials to a second step. So we'll call this day 2. So we're going to continue the process just like I normally do. We start off with the first part and then we finish off the rest. So in yesterday's video or the previous day's video, we found the greatest common factor of these two terms to be 4x. So what we're going to do is use that greatest common factor to continue the process. Get these two terms. So the first one is 8x. We want negative 12x to see if you get back that original term or that original expression. So I'm going to go ahead and write that greatest common factor here. And essentially, we're multiplying times something squared. So I know I want to have an outcome of 8x squared in that first one. So what would I be multiplying by to get 8x squared? Well, I know 4 times 2 is 8. And then x times x is going to give us x squared. For the second one, so we need negative 12x here. So I already have the x, so that's not a thing. So here, 4 times what will give us negative 12? 4 times negative 3. So what we're going to do is take that greatest common factor and throw that out front. The first part that was left over goes here, and the second part that was left over goes here. So essentially what we've done is we've undone distribution. So normally we would be multiplying to create the different terms, but now what we're doing is what we call factoring. So the remaining terms become what's inside. So if we were going to write this, we would have 4x times 2x minus 3. And remember, you can always check by doing that distribution. So yesterday we did this one. The greatest common factor we got was 3z. So I'm going to go ahead and get 3z hanging out front. So 3z times what will give us 6z squared? So it looks like we would have to be multiplying times 2, right? Because 3 times 2 is 6. And then z, because z times z is z squared. So that's the first piece. For the second part, it's addition. So I'm going to go ahead and put my plus sign here. 3 times what gives us 15? 3 times 5. We already have the z here, so then it would just be 5. So this is our final outcome. This is factoring out the greatest common factor of 3z. Let me try to write it a little differently on the next one. This time we have 3 terms. If you recall, the greatest common factor we had here was a 4. So 4 is going to be hanging out front, while we're going to have leftovers here. So 4 times what will give you 4y squared? Well, it has to be a 1, and then we're looking at y squared. 4 times what will give you 12? This will be 3. We still need that y there too, so it'll be 3y. And last but not least, 4 times what is 8? And it would be 2. All right, continuing along. In this case, our greatest common factor was 6x. I have 2 terms, so 6x is here. I'm going to have 2 terms here. So what I want to do first is at 6x, to get 12x squared, I know I multiplied times 2x, because x times x is x squared. Now the second piece, if you notice, we have subtraction, so there's going to have to be a minus sign here. And 6x is the same thing as 6x, so we know it's going to be a minus 1. So this would be as simplified or factored as we can get this. All right, let's try some others from the beginning. So here we have some terms that we're going to find the greatest common factor for. So I'm going to start with 5d squared and negative 10d. So this would be 1 and 5, and then D, D. Down here I would have 1, 2, 5, 10, and D. My greatest common factor is going to be 5D. So my greatest common factor is 5D. And now let's talk about what's left over. So for the first term, I have 5D squared, so I would need a D. And the second term I know is subtraction. 5D times 2 will give us 5D squared. So this would be our factored form. All right, I'm going to skip to the last one here just because of the space. So I have 24G squared. So this would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 8, 12, and 24. And then, of course, G, G. And then for 16, I have 1, 2, 4, 8, and 16. There are no G's attached to that one. So when I go to circle my greatest common factor, it looks as though it's going to be 8 by itself. So 8 is going to hang out front. 8 times what gives you 24? That's going to be an 8 times 3. And I do need the G squared because there's no G outside the parentheses. And then for that second term, it's going to be plus 2 because 8 times 2 is 16.